I'm deep in the no mandates world. I think that personal sovereignty over your body is crucial and must be primary. And the rights of the state to impose a medical procedure on an individual I think that there should be a change in the Supreme Court position on this person.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number 225-226-4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business.
Welcome to the State of Freedom, everyone. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. We are, as you know, grounded in faith and the Constitution and committed to giving voice to the truth, living with courage, and taking action. It's Tuesday, February 3rd. It's 10 a.m. Central, and I'm Danielle Walker, joined by my friend and co-host, the watchdog in chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, Chris Alexander. Good morning, Chris.
Well, good morning, Danielle. How are you today?
I'm good. We are coming to you live on Voice of the People, USA TV and radio network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. You can always catch us later on our audio-only podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcast as well. Well, we are so honored today to have Dr. Robert Malone with us. Let me bring him forward while I make his introduction. Good morning, Dr. Malone.
Hey, how you doing today?
Excellent. I just was about to introduce you, but I wanted you to be here for it. He really needs no introduction, but as many of you know, Dr. Malone is a physician, a biochemist, and a vaccinologist renowned for his pioneering contributions to mRNA technology in the late 1980s. He holds an MD from Northwestern University with training at Harvard and UC Davis. His career includes academic roles at UC Davis and the University of Maryland, plus biotech leadership in vaccines, biodefense, and clinical development. Currently, he serves as vice chair of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and he is advising on national vaccine policy. And related to Louisiana, he's an adjunct professor at LSU's Pennington Biomedical Research Center, offering federal policy insights and research collaboration support.
That's the best part, Danielle. That last part's the best part. I mean, I know we're biased, but
it is. Welcome to the show, Dr. Malone.
Thanks a lot for having me on. Hope you guys are having a little better weather than we are down there. It's a little cold up here in Virginia.
I saw y'all have snowcrete. I mean, it got cold here, but cold for us is anything under about 70.
Very, very
People
true.
in Florida are just whining like crazy because it got down in the low 30s.
Exactly.
It's true. It's true. We're
It's so
a weak
true.
bunch,
We're
but
wimps.
I'm very heat resistant, though. I can tell you.
Okay.
It's amazing to me how, on one hand, we can lasso alligators. On the other hand, we can't handle cold weather.
It's
Oh, well,
true.
you know, you're good at some things, not at others. That's
There
okay.
you go.
That's right. Well, Dr. Malone, before we get started, I always start out with a scripture to frame the show. Passage is from Galatians. It's chapter 4, verses 16 through 18. And this jumped off the pages at me today. It says, "Have I really become your enemy because I tell you the truth? Can't you see what these false teachers are doing? They want to win you over so you will side with them. They want you divided from me so you will follow only them. Would you call that integrity? Isn't it better to seek excellence and integrity always and not just when I'm with you? And that was the Apostle Paul. He was stunned and exasperated to see the very people who once loved and cared for him when he initially preached the gospel to them, ones who received the message of Jesus with joy, returning to their old, empty religious patterns and following religious leaders who wanted them back in bondage. And the religious leaders that came behind Paul worked to stir up doubt and to separate the people from the truth and freedom they received when they believed Paul's message of Jesus as the Messiah who brings freedom. They weighted people down with lies and man-made rules again. And isn't it amazing that the enemy's tactics over time just seem to adapt? Lying, stirring up doubt in people's hearts, dividing people, weighing them down with man-made rules and restrictions that accomplish nothing of value, but keep people fearful, distracted, and focused on themselves, and somehow managing to make the ones who tell the truth out to be the enemy.
You know, there are certain truths, Danielle, that absolutely never change. And that is one of them. And I remember going back years, the initial COVID outbreak and then the things that came after. Dr. Malone was always piercing the veil of half truths or lies and penetrating with the truth, and always kept his eye on the truth. And there were times when Dr. Malone, quite honestly, was one of a very few, like the St. John the Baptist out in the wilderness, but consistently brought forth the truth. And here we are. So in connection with my personal welcome of you today, Dr. Malone, I wanted to thank you for the courage that you showed over a course of 5 or 6 years to make sure that people like me and Danielle and citizens across Louisiana knew the truth despite the lies.
Well, from the heart, thank you for that. And it hasn't been an easy road, but it never is. Paul was certainly an interesting character. It's a profound quote that you have there from Galatians.
Yeah.
And it, as you're pointing out, Chris, it illustrates that human behavior has not really changed much in the ensuing centuries.
Yeah.
We still suffer from a lot of the same problems. You know, one of those is the issue of the Tower of Babel. That I think that's a great metaphor for how we've all become fragmented, fractured, divided from ourselves as a community, to the point now where we have so many of these little kind of cells of people that have agreement internally, but don't communicate with others or disagree. And so they separate themselves. We've functionally made it through social media and everything else into a situation in which we're no longer communicating, much as the Tower of Babel indicated. And we're turned against ourselves, which relates to today's quote.
Yeah.
I think that increasingly the need is to find ways to bring us back together as community and emphasize our common humanity. And here you're all within the Judeo-Christian tradition. That is a teaching and a way of being and a philosophy that has withstood millennia. It is really a very, I don't want to get too philosophical here, but if you look across the world, those that are of the Judeo-Christian tradition, this may sound, I'm sure it'll sound elitist, that civilizationally is quite mature as a structure, as a belief system, as an ethical structure. And we're dealing with many other, let's say, cultural structures that are more primitive. How else can you say it?
Yeah.
And so it's a funny challenge we have because, of course, the Bible teaches the importance of love and acceptance and turning the other cheek and generosity and giving in a world in which there are other cultures that are quite willing to take advantage of that and exploit it. It's becoming now I'm going to cross over a little more modern. It's becoming a problem of game theory.
Hmm.
How much can you give when others in the environment will exploit that for their own purposes and not respect your giving act and your intrinsic generosity and empathy that's driving that? You know, at what point do you say this is enough? We're not going to tolerate this. We're not going to let you take advantage of us, and we're not going to let you abuse us. I think that the European nation states are really having to deal with that right now with their open door immigration policy. And we are also here in the
Yeah.
States. Americans are generous people. We want to help others, but not, it's not acceptable to do that and sacrifice our own well-being, security, and our children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Dr. Malone, that you say that because specifically, I didn't know we were going to be talking about immigration, but it's such an interesting point that you bring up. You know, there are Christians, and I have friends who are sincere Christians. I mean, pure-hearted people who cannot, however, make the intellectual and the moral distinction between generosity and being open and allowing people access to things that are good on the one hand, and on the other hand, the absolute constitutional not only right but obligation that a government has to secure its own borders and to protect its own country. They can't seem to make that distinction, and they seem to conflate the individual moral obligation or the obligation of the church with the duties and the function of government. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, that was a kind of a little bit of a softball you just threw. I mean, I concur with you. And this gets to my point of us extending empathy to those around us. And by that, I'm talking about your Christian colleagues that are facing this paradox. I think we need to approach those folks with an open heart and empathy and understanding of the paradox that they're confronting. And frankly, the cognitive dissonance, to borrow another term from psychology, this psychological pain that comes when you hold two opposing truths in your mind at the same time. And I think it's a sign of a mature mind that one can resolve these contradictions that are common in modern life in ways that allow you to move forward and do the right thing. In what you're touching on is this deep fundamental paradox of how much do we give, how far do we extend empathy when the person that you're empathizing with will exploit that for their own benefit, and in so doing compromise your own interests. I mean,
Yeah.
the Bible is full of stories of Jesus being incredibly giving all the way up to his sacrifice on the cross. But it's also full, particularly in the Old Testament, of stories of the need to gild one's loins and, you know, go forward in a way that defends your culture and your religion and your belief system. And I think that the those that uh, fall too far on either side uh, can go astray and can find themselves in a position where their their conscience, their soul gets compromised because they're not able to strike that balance, and then they have to live with the consequences as they play out over time.
Yeah.
I think a way for those folks, you have to approach them, as I said, with open heart and open mind, and you can't really directly confront them with the paradox because, as I say, it causes pain, this cognitive dissonance. What you can do is follow the lesson of Aesop. You'll remember Aesop's fables, where you use another analogy, you use something parallel. In the case of Aesop's fables, of course, it was stories about animals, or the Uncle Remus stories that are now forbidden throughout the South also were those kinds of parables. But for instance, for those folks that we're talking about, we could do things like help them to understand the logic of game theory and how that's fundamental to many human interactions. We can talk about business. We can talk about how if you had a business partner that was taking advantage of you every time you did something to try to help them or lift them up, or an employee, you wouldn't want to continue employing them. You wouldn't want to continue that interaction. I think we can't, these types of folks that are dug in, we can't go at it directly. I
Yeah.
think we have to go at it kind of sideways and patiently and kind of try to help bring them along towards a more mature understanding of the complexities of life,
Yeah.
really, what it is.
Yeah.
How have you, Dr. Malone, generally responded to the really, I would call just a fuselage of criticism from the establishment?
Fuselage, that is an excellent use of the language.
Yeah,
I
yeah, and I
congratulate
don't
you
know
on that.
why. I only think about that in association with you and some of the attacks that you've undergone, from which you have emerged victorious, I might add.
So another term that I learned during the last 5 years was defenestration, the throwing of one out of the window.
Yeah.
To use the technical terms.
Yeah.
Right.
So
But I've noticed that
so
that
so it's
you've
a, but it's
you've
a
never
deep.
responded to the attacks on you and the lies told about you in a similar way. You remind me of what Marcus Aurelius said. The greatest revenge you can have is not to be like the one who is trying to injure you. And that seems to be the way you've always responded.
Another
How have
excellent quote.
you been able to do that, to maintain such steady composure amidst all of that?
So this is deep. We all have our defense mechanisms. And one of the things I was taught when I had to go through psychology in medical school was that there are more evolved defense mechanisms and less evolved defense mechanisms. Getting angry and punching somebody in the nose is a less evolved defense mechanism. One of the ones that's not as fully mature, but up on the scale, is intellectualization, which is kind of my default go-to, as you might well imagine from talking. And so one of the things I've done with all of that, hate and energy, that all that negative energy, is to try to comprehend where it's coming from and how it manifests and how it's weaponized in particular. So this is a significant topic, has been over time, less so now, on our Substack, which is how I make our living now, Malone.news, not to make a egregious self-promotion plug there.
No, you can definitely self-promote.
But
We got it here.
I've written about the psychology, for instance, talking about Matthias Desmet's theories about mass formation and about things like the tendency of groups to engage in groupthink and how that's involved with what's happened. And then as I was moving along that corridor of trying to make sense out of what I was experiencing, all the hate coming from mostly left-wing media, etc. I was digging into that and ran into a academic paper coming from people aligned with the defense industry that talked about fifth generation warfare and propaganda. And of course, that led me back to Edward Bernays. Was he a cousin of Sigmund Freud?
Hmm.
That is given credit for really the creation of modern propaganda and its weaponization for marketing and other things. And then forward. So what happened was I wrote about this again and again and again, and all the hate and stuff coming over social media, the attacks that I experienced, the behavior of people, influencers on social media. It's still a common topic. One of the current themes is this practice of outrage farming or rage farming that is used by many social media influencers, and it works. This constant promotion of outrage or anger and the dopamine hits that come with it drive clicks, likes, and follows. And of course, with that comes monetization.
Yeah.
What I did with this is I dove in, and this particular paper led me down the rabbit hole of fifth generation warfare, or the weaponization of modern psychology for purposes of propaganda and, non-kinetic combat. This is tech that was really well developed, in particular during the various Middle Eastern conflicts. It was used by the intelligence community, continues to be used in the color revolutions, particularly throughout the Arabian Peninsula, and has been turned during COVID onto civilians by their own government. So, kind of walked through all this, assimilated this, learned from the literature and from academics that are writing and investigating these phenomena, and then turned my lens to, well, what am I experiencing right now? And how does that relate to what I'm learning in the domain of propaganda, censorship, nudge theory, fifth generation warfare, etc.? And that gave rise to two books. One is The Lies My Government Told Me and the Better Future Coming. And then the next one was Psy-War, Enforcing the New World Order. So these are both attempts to take all of this lessons and learned insight about all these things, and then pushing them out to people, hoping that those that are experiencing this, because it's not just me, it's so many other people, and at various levels, probably even impacting on you folks from time to time. So pushing out through these books and our Substacks, what I'm learning, in hopes that what it does is it teaches, and you might even say vaccinates people against these strategies and tactics, so that when they see it, they can recognize it and adapt. Here in the United States, we've been subjected to Madison Avenue since we were in diapers.
Yeah.
And we're actually a lot more sophisticated and resistant to a lot of the marketing propaganda technology that's been developed over time, compared to folks that haven't experienced that. Maybe they're in developing economies or in rural environments or whatever. So we've become very resistant. They've had to kind of get better and better and better in their tech to sell us cornflakes and Coca-Cola. Or I mean, if you want a case, an example, I don't know if you've seen the latest Budweiser commercial, trying to recover from the Bud Light fiasco.
My gosh. Yeah, it's so sweet. I teared up
Oh,
100%.
yeah. How can you not tear up? It's all AI. We all know it's fake, and it just jerks our heartstrings like nobody's business.
Yeah.
This is the eagle growing up, being nurtured by the Clydesdale draft horse, which is, of course, a surrogate for the Budweiser hitch and the Budweiser company. It's, a fantastic piece of propaganda.
It is.
And it foreshadows what we're about to be hit with, is a world in which our entire online reality is carefully crafted and manipulated. As I say, with a nudge technology and all of this psychological warfare that our governments now believe is acceptable to deploy on our citizens, we are in an environment in which every single thing, all information that you encounter, what you think, feel, and believe, is being actively manipulated. And that is being done in part algorithmically using AI now to target you as an individual based on what is functionally your avatar. This huge library of information that they've accumulated on all of us, such as, you ever think about what happens when you get those discounts at the grocery store? That's all data. It
Yeah.
goes straight into the database. You like to buy Hershey's chocolate or whatever the thing is, right? And this all goes into a profile, and those profiles, from a Christian point of view, I argue, are stealing a part of your soul and reselling it to third parties for political and commercial advantage. That's what's going on. Somebody posted the other day, I thought this was a fantastic little X quip. They said, how disappointing that we now have some of the richest people in the world in the technology industry in Silicon Valley, and they spend all their time stealing our data so they can sell us stuff.
Exactly. I saw that too, and I was like, you're so spot on.
Yeah.
I mean, they could be doing real important things to advance society, but instead all they do is farm our data and sell it to people.
To Elon's credit, he does do good. I'm not entirely sure where Elon fits on the various spectrums. I think the jury is still out on that, but I wouldn't say that he's a deeply Christian person based on his lifestyle and choices, but he has done a lot of good, and I credit him for that.
Dr. Malone, I have to ask you about this because I'm just so intrigued by this. But when you talk about fifth generation warfare, are you talking about, and again, because I want our listeners to understand this, what specifically are you talking about? How do you understand and appreciate fifth generation warfare right now in our country?
So there is a academic structure for folks that are employed by the Department of War in war colleges, etc., for parsing and thinking about warfare tactics and strategy. And there's a variety of these ways of thinking about warfare, and of course Clausewitz, etc. But one of those is to parse warfare basically into technology compartments. And so third generation warfare, you could argue that the German panzer divisions and Blitzkrieg were great examples of third generation warfare involving kinetic war in which battlefield commanders like Rommel are given a lot of discretion. Operational discretion is one example of third generation warfare. Fourth gets into the insurgency and kind of hybrid warfare that we associated with various guerrilla movements, including the Viet Cong through Al Qaeda and the Taliban. And the Afghanistan conflict is more of a fourth generation space. Fifth generation warfare was developed to counter fourth generation warfare successes largely. And you can think of it as advanced propaganda capabilities merged with modern psychology. So that gets into, for instance, nudge technology. An example of nudge technology is if you go and manage to find my Joe Rogan podcast, you'll see that the CDC has a little banner there that says something like, well, if you really want to know the true about COVID and COVID vaccines, you need to go to the CDC, and here's the link. And, there's a lot of other kind of messaging like that. The BBC and the UK are really deep in the use of nudge technology. And we see it, for instance, if you ever get that kind of prickly feeling as you're watching Netflix that you're being manipulated because every single show seems to have a gay couple and interracial marriages and all that. Oh, that's all social engineering. That's all nudge. And Barack Obama gets the credit for bringing nudge technology formally into the government and empowering it through a presidential order that directed basically all federal agencies to start using nudge tech. So fifth gen is really developed. We could argue that Sun Tzu in The Art of War is an example of fifth generation technology, the use of propaganda. Many of those messages are embedded in Sun Tzu, but it really kind of geared up a lot during the Second World War. One of the great examples was the Ghost Army that was used to convince the Nazis that we were landing somewhere that we were at, then where we ended up landing for the final invasion. Or the notorious example of the apparent German aviator that died and drifted onto, I think it was Spanish shores, was recovered by the Nazis and had fake orders that were being carried in this corpse talking about where the invasion was going to happen in Spain. And it was all fake. And it caused the Nazis to redirect, again, deploy their troops in the wrong place. So those are that kind of is the birth of modern psywar. And I didn't invent the term psywar, but rather you can find it if you search psywar and U.S. Army. There is a fantastic psywar recruitment video from Fort Bragg, as I recall, from the psywar unit. Generally, it scares the pants off of people, but it's a series of clips, and each one of those clips in a kind of a video montage, references back to a prior psywar action by largely the U.S. Army. So what happened was that tech really got developed as I said, in response to the fact that we keep losing these fourth generation wars.
Yeah.
And then along came the supposed Russian disinformation campaign, and then the COVID crisis and the quote anti-vaxxers. The governments, particularly the Five Eyes nations, US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and to some extent the more extended NATO nations like Germany and Austria, deployed this military-grade technology on their own citizens. And it's now justified. It's really quite rampant in Canada and the UK. Governments there believe that, and frankly, under Obama, our government, and by the way, that order is still active. Trump has not rescinded it. The U.S. government now, and particularly UK under Starmer and Canada, believe that it's entirely appropriate to deploy this military grade psychological warfare technology on their own citizens. As I
That's so
mentioned, it's a
fascinating
trap.
because didn't President Trump spoke about this during his campaign, and he referenced the illegal fifth generation warfare or psychological warfare that was being enacted against the American people. He
CDC
even
is,
referenced it.
I kind of pissed off Stephanie Spear the other day, I think, by writing an essay exposing how the CDC is still doing this under Bobby and Assistant Secretary O'Neill. I mean, this hasn't stopped. And Trump has not rescinded that order. And I wish he would. So then that's fifth gen. Sixth generation warfare is generally considered to be the guided munitions. So this is hypersonic missiles, smart bombs, cruise missiles, et cetera, is sixth. Seventh generation warfare is the new drone warfare kit, and that is absolutely transforming the nature of modern warfare. It played a key role in the recent, how should we call it, rebanding Maduro down in Venezuela. It's, what's going on with drone technology right now is absolutely transforming the battlefield. So that's the
Yes.
origin. Is I didn't invent it. It's just nomenclature that was developed among military theoreticians, academics, etc.,
Yeah.
to describe this general domain. But
Yeah.
there's no question that modern psychology, and we go into great depth in this in the Cywar book, various examples. Modern psychology has been weaponized to enable more advanced propaganda and manipulation and management of civilian citizens.
Yeah. And it sounds, Dr. Malone, like in substance, what you're talking about here is not new. I
Mm.
mean, this goes back centuries, back to Machiavelli, and as you said, Sun
Yep,
Tzu.
yep,
These
yep.
concepts
Machiavelli
in
also.
practice are not reinventing the wheel. They are coming about
The huge difference is the combination of modern psychology and algorithmic
technology.
data processing, and
Yeah.
now integrated into that is artificial intelligence that
Yeah. So
allows
the
all this
technology
technical scale.
component really, it's the same beast, but it is so much more pervasive and apparently effective on a much broader scale because of technology.
And almost inescapable.
Yes. And
Oh,
almost inescapable.
it is. We
Yeah.
are
And Dr.
indebted.
Malone, I wanted to ask you about this. Apparently, it's been quite effective because I know many people, and also based upon my observation from a distance. Let's just take the trans issue, the
Yeah,
transgender issue for a
great
second.
example.
There are Americans across the country who have now been convinced against every impulse of their own nature and every modicum of common sense in their body that in saying that boys can't be boys and girls can't be boys and God created male and female, that somehow they are the ones perpetuating a myth. They are the ones who are saying things that are untrue, and the prevailing wisdom is on the other side, which, as we know, is sheer lunacy. You know that this psychological warfare is having some effect when people come to that
Oh,
point.
it's beyond some effect. It is profoundly distorting our culture. It is part of, there is a intentional effort to fragment and shatter uh, American culture and any ability to achieve political consensus. But
Yeah,
beyond that, there's a fraction of the population that is highly, highly susceptible to this kind of tech. There's a big overlap between them and the people that can be readily hypnotized.
Hmm.
And as we're seeing these, what appear to be crazy, outlandish behaviors, and some of the stuff going around with Minnesota and ICE gives you a very clear example of that. We have again, I really don't want to deride certain segments of society, but we might call them liberals. But there is a cohort of society that is being driven mad by the implementation of this technology. They are behaving in ways that are psychologically unhinged. They are not healthy. And as if that isn't bad enough, all of us literally, that are not quite aged, have grown up in the era of the television. The television has profound game changer in terms of deployment of of this kind of propaganda and psychological manipulation technology. And we have been practically birthed and raised on the tube. And I think that is part of what's driven this, what I argue is really an epidemic of narcissism. And that there are things about narcissism that make people very, very easy to manipulate. It's also the narcissism that drives a lot of these bizarre social influencer behaviors. But and maybe that's one of the other things. Christianity is a great moderator in terms of kind of bringing us back to cultural harmony and kind of levelness, helping keep us from extremes of behavior and thought.
Yeah. And I think at the core of that, Dr. Malone, what an interesting point. And perhaps this is the reason why there has been such enormous efforts across the centuries by governments as well as individuals to destroy Christianity, because of the fundamental premise of Christianity, which is that I am not God.
Yes. Well, so to your point, the notorious statements from Yuval Harari in the title of his book and the World Economic Forum, they are very invested, as are this vanguard of Silicon Valley, the transhumanists. They're very invested in the idea that they can become God, or they have already become gods.
Yeah.
And
that is the absolute core of it, Dr. Malone. I believe it. And really, the two fundamental concepts of Christianity, the intrinsic dignity of the individual, not the state, and the sovereignty of God. And they have spent generations and centuries trying to destroy it.
Yeah, it's takes a special kind of leader to exist in alignment with Christian principles. And those are few and far between. We seem to have created a culture in which we select for narcissism and sociopathy and psychopathy instead of kind of magnanimous giving. And the idea of being a servant leader is very much out of favor. And as you look back through history at the really successful civilizations, they often have leaders, in some cases, totalitarian or authoritarian leaders, kings, etc. But they stay grounded in the idea of service. And that just it seems like, earlier on, Danielle was talking about the muddy water of DC. This is why I hate DC culture. It is so self-serving. It's just people just are wrapped up in self and self-promotion and self-advancement. And it's few and far between that you find people that are really committed to service to their country and to the American experiment.
It's true.
Strange that it's that way, but DC is really quite sick.
When I lived there, I always referred to it as the over-the-shoulder situation. If you're standing in a cocktail reception talking to someone, you notice that they're looking over your shoulder to see who more important is in the room that I need to ingratiate myself with, who can advance what I'm trying to do myself. So absolutely, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And we have taken...
Danielle, I have to ask you about this before we move on, though. I have to ask you about this, Dr. Malone. Yeah. Let me ask you about this real quick. You mentioned a minute ago that it is so very rare to find someone who really is faithful in word and action to core principles of Christianity, or really core principles of virtue that I think are universal. Marcus Aurelius was, I think an aberration in that sense. He ruled the Roman Empire for 17 or 18 years. And because of his own observations of exactly what you just were talking about in DC, the self-serving nature of culture, the selfish ambition of men, he was at first paralyzed by that observation, but ultimately it forced him to write something called the Meditations, and which is now on The World Has Benefited By, which is essentially a book of virtues. And so I just wanted to point that out, that it is possible. It's rare, but it's certainly possible to exist in the world and to exist in this corrupt culture that we are all a part of, and yet not become a part of it. And you, sir, may be an example of that.
One of the things, so thank you for that. And I would mention Cicero also, since we're going to go there. The death of Socrates is, I, I, I had a weird upbringing in the sense that the state of California back in the day had real gifted and talented programs. And I read many of the classics in sixth grade, including all of Shakespeare, because that was kind of, what was enabling. But I think one of the key things for me has been the longstanding commitment to my marriage. My wife and I found each other when we were literally 15 and 16 years old, and we're still together. So we're about to have our 47th wedding anniversary. By building that dyadic, stable, committed relationship, it's enabled us to move through time and all the challenges of, we kind of emerged in the 70s, and that's when we were in high school, and then the craziness of the 80s and beyond. And it hasn't been an easy life. We've basically bootstrapped, but we've stayed together. And by staying together and staying committed to each other, one of the things that happens, every married couple will make jokes about this, but we kind of provide a check on each other to keep us balanced, on the straight and narrow, true to our uh, ethics, and kind of focused on the long haul as opposed to the short term wins or benefits that often people get caught up in. So I think one of the key things there has been this stable long-term marriage that provides both of us with a protection against the buffets of time and setbacks and everything else. Really, so many people these days, particularly, they defer partnering in marriage until later 20s or early 30s. And they feel the norm is that you have to sample the field and engage in functionally serial monogamy, I think it destroys the ability of couples to bond. My wife and I both have come to believe that there's something magic when you see these couples that have been together for a very, very long period of time, often starting back in their teens. They are able to kind of, as the Bible discusses, they grow together to become one and yet two, and that gives you stability. It's um and the ability to kind of stay true to yourself and stay true to your partner, I think is crucial and surprisingly rare. But
Yeah.
the family and couples and marriage is a cornerstone of a stable, productive society.
It absolutely is.
And it sounds like Dr. Malone that if you had not met your lovely wife, your life would have probably taken a very different course.
There's no question I would have been lost. The 70s were not, especially in the Central Coast of California, that was not the norm.
There was a lot of trouble to be had or to be
Yeah.
found if you were looking.
Yeah. And then also her father in particular became my mentor. And that was crucial. And then the kind of the whole ethic of uh, work, productive work that I was raised with. I started, earning money when I was about 12. I think I got 10 cents an hour or something for pulling weeds at my neighbors. The idea of uh, productive manual labor and staying productive is something that my wife and I both share. She is a really hard worker. She's just wrapping up another book right now. We put out those Substacks on a daily basis. And plus we run the farm. People tend to be surprised, but it's just, if you get up in the morning and apply yourself and just continue to work away, you can get all kinds of stuff done.
Yeah. Speaking of applying yourself, Dr. Malone, what are you applying yourself to right now at Pennington?
So Pennington, I thought you might ask me questions about Pennington. I'm not sure what to say about Pennington. There was some blowback promptly from faculty members at Pennington to me being affiliated that I found very discouraging. I still haven't actually physically visited there, I've provided kind of consulting and coaching services to senior management, which is now moved on. And there's new management coming in. I'm not sure how they're going to use me or if they are. I look forward to upcoming visit and meeting once again my friend the governor and Evelyn Griffith, who is a friend, now your Surgeon General, and my colleague on the ACIP. I'll be seeing her later this February. There was supposed to be a series of Louisiana related events, kind of an early Mardi Gras in DC last week, and there was talk about me meeting with Pennington people there, but that somehow didn't happen. So I'm just not. The honest truth is, I don't understand where this goes from here. It wasn't really a um, warm embrace by some of the faculty, and I just don't know where it goes from here. I'm very glad to help Pennington. It's a world leading capability there in Louisiana, particularly as it relates to nutrition and nutrition research at a time when nutrition and nutrition research are central.
Yeah.
They're busy branching out and setting up partnership agreements with King Faisal Hospital and KSA and other activities. But in terms of how they want to use me, to be determined under this new leadership.
Well, I hope you get a good response soon from the governor and from Dr. Griffin.
I always get a good response from Landry.
Hopefully they can stir up some things. But I did want to also ask you, and this is what happens, folks, whenever we pray beforehand and say, Lord, you can take this show whatever direction you want. Sometimes it goes completely in a different direction than we had anticipated. So thanks, Dr. Malone, for letting us take you on a rabbit trail far from where we had originally intended. But you had
Those are the
mentioned
best. They're always
they are the best. They are the best. Of course, you are the vice chair of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices with Dr. Evelyn Griffith. And first, just a huge thanks is owed to both of you and to the committee for your work on changing the vaccine schedule, the childhood vaccine schedule, and for ending the recommendation on the Hep B vaccine for infants. I just feel that was a huge, huge win.
It was the most stressful meeting and meeting context that I've ever encountered in my professional life, and I've been in a number of them. But
Really.
that one was pretty ugly. Somehow I brought the plane in and got it landed, but it was a
Wow.
little touch and go for a while.
Well, I would love to hear you talk about it if you want to, but I also wanted to know if you had any inkling on whether COVID will be on the horizon. The COVID vaccine will be making it to your agenda anytime soon as well.
So I can't. I'm both Evelyn and I are embargoed from talking about the agenda and what's going to happen at the next meeting. But I am a member of the COVID working group, and I am aware of we've been doing deep dives into all the associated data. And for anybody that's interested in this, the essay that I published this morning on why the boosters didn't make sense and what's the immunology of what's called class switching relates to that. And that was developed as a document for the COVID working group. If you want to take a peek at that, you'll get a window into some of the things that we've been discussing. And you might speculate that those things might come up at the February.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know on a similar note that the HHS under RFK Jr.'s leadership, specifically, I think the CDC has taken autism very seriously and the incidence, the rise of
Yeah.
autism, the
So
connection to vaccines.
that's a key issue, not just for Bobby, but also for President Trump.
Yeah.
People don't appreciate that President Trump has been pushing Bobby, not the other way around. There was a period of time where Bobby was getting weekly messages from the president, particularly about the hepatitis B birth dose. And then after the hepatitis B birth dose, the president provided the secretary with a presidential directive that there be a reconsideration of the entire childhood vaccine schedule in alignment with peer Western nations. And of course, that happened, much to the chagrin of many of the professional societies. So the president is very much interested in this topic area also. It's not just Bobby. And
Yeah.
you'll recall that the president spoke about this in the context of Tylenol
Yeah.
previously, and the entire world kind of Lewis circuit over that one. But I'm still convinced the data are fairly strong and the scientific theory behind it is
Yeah.
solid.
Of the connection, Dr. Malone, between vaccines and the increased rate of autism among children?
The connection between Tylenol
Tylenol.
in pregnancy and in newborns and autism. But the vaccine story, Evelyn, actually, I helped her prepare the slides about the potential downside of alum or aluminum salts, which she presented at the last meeting successfully. So for her, that was a big achievement to get through that. It was rather intimidating, but she got it done. What's the new news in this front is, yes, we have a working group set up to address the overall vaccine schedule, and within that, the effects of adjuvants and compiling adjuvants is being addressed. But there's also a congressionally mandated autism, basically, study group. And that's been populated by folks that are more, let's say, aligned with the pharmaceutical industry. And they have recently been retired. And that committee has been reconstituted with folks that are more open-minded about the potential link between autism and vaccines. A lot of people get pretty frustrated that Bobby just doesn't wave a magic wand and make all these problems go away. But that's not what, if he was to do that, the lawsuits in federal courts would immediately shut it down. He just doesn't have the operational latitude to do that. And if he was to go tell Commissioner McCarty what to do over at the FDA, he might have the authority to do that. But the howls of indignation and the lawsuits there would also just be legion.
Yeah.
He even in the case of this realigned vaccine schedule, they were going to announce that before Christmas, as I recall. And they postponed it. I wrote a Substack about this. They postponed it because legal within the command structure raised a lot of objections and said that if you do this unilaterally, you're going to have so many lawsuits that it's just going to get shut down and you're going to lose those lawsuits. So they had to kind of step back, rethink their strategy. And the result was the deployment in January of the vaccine schedule. So that's just the way things are. We have a divided government in many ways. And we can't ignore the law, and the judiciary and the executive branch can't ignore the law passed by Congress. So Bobby does have a lot of constraints, but within that, they're making progress, but it takes time. I'm sorry, it just does.
Well, sure, especially when you're dealing with the sort of bureaucracy that we're dealing with in our federal government.
CDC is at war with itself. Absolutely.
Yeah. Dr. Malone, I've got to ask you this question because when I first became acquainted with you right after the COVID pandemic came out, and when all of the lockdowns were going on, all of the coercion to get the COVID shot. And I went back then and I just sort of refreshed myself with it this morning. The vaccine mandate, which caused so many people so much harm. I went back and looked at the history of that, and there is a history in our country of the government under certain extreme circumstances requiring under the constitutional police authority that it has.
I think it's Jacobson is the case, right?
But even before that, George Washington made his soldiers, it was very primitive, get inoculated against smallpox, and then it was implemented on the local level in Massachusetts, and ultimately, you're right, went up to the Supreme Court. But I wanted to ask you about that. There was a 30% mortality rate of smallpox at that time. Certainly, the government was more justified. So here's my question for you. If we wake up tomorrow morning, during the next week or so, and there's a virulent outbreak of something, and you believe that it's got a 20-30% mortality rate worldwide. What does Dr. Malone advise that we do to address that quickly and save lives? What would be your protocol?
So I don't have to speculate. I've lived it a few times. I was right at the tip of the spear with the Ebola West African outbreak. And in that case, what came to fore was me working closely with a company called New Link Genetics to work with the DoD to advance a vaccine candidate And then I got it because New Link didn't want to carry it forward. I got it licensed to Merck, and that is now the Merck Ebola vaccine. It was originally developed in Canada. But in particular, and for instance, in the case of this outbreak, what I did at the beginning was to do a quick threat assessment. This is kind of standard intelligence community, DoD kind of approach to things. Make it, and also Homeland Security does this. So I made a threat assessment and then I looked at the options for saving lives. And my conclusion was the most efficient and rapid pathway was with repurposed drugs, and particularly focusing on treating and preventing death from the symptoms rather than from by pursuing antiviral activity. And one of the things that came out of that was an early paper in Frontiers in Pharmacology that still stands the test of time about the role of mast cells in COVID and the use of famotidine. So I still think there are many in the government that believe that there is a strong role to be played in enabling drug repurposing and frankly listening carefully to frontline physicians that are trying to address how to save the lives of their patients. And that kind of bottom up solution is classically much more effective than the top down Tony Fauci tells you what to do kind of thing. Which, that's one of the problems with as we think about globalizing health and globalization in general is it's all fine and it's kind of like you're referring to past history of the Roman Empire. It's all good when you have a benign Marcus Aurelius, not so good when you have a leader that isn't so enlightened. And so the problem with the centralized global or even national solution for these things is what happens when they get it wrong, and the bias that comes in with the credentialed expert class and their kind of consensus about things. It's just not been as reliable, in my opinion, as listening to frontline folks and docs that are trying to figure out how to
Yeah.
fix the problem.
I think that's a very, very honest and thank you for just being honest about it because I think what you're suggesting here, Dr. Malone, is that it's really impossible for you to be able to pre-write a script on something like this, but basically the first thing you would do would be to talk to the people who are the closest to it and what are they experiencing and what are they using that may work, and then you would base your policy upon actual data and actual evidence instead of imposing a policy that is more consistent with perhaps a political agenda opposing that from on high without regard to what is actually going on
Yeah.
the ground.
Oh, well said. And that isn't theoretical. I'm not just saying that. I actually did that.
It's not theoretical exactly for you, but you do not envision, nonetheless, on the stair. Would you have imposed would you impose a lockdown? I think you were probably against these lockdowns from the beginning. You were opposing mandatory vaccines. Is there any scenario in which you would recommend the imposition of a universal lockdown on people?
So that's the data are in on the lockdown policies. They did far more harm than they did good.
Yeah.
And so that I think we've already mined that, and it just doesn't carry water. Likewise, the masking policies were quickly debunked, even though they continue to be promoted. The problem there, among others, is that a lot of these viruses will transmit through the eyes, ocular. And the last time I checked, face mask doesn't cover your eyes. But um, there's where things get challenging. You mentioned the scenario of a highly lethal virus. And if you added the caveat that was spread through respiratory route, then things get pretty squirrely because then we're this tension between the rights of the individuals and the rights of society. That's where things get complicated. And if you have a highly lethal pathogen, I'm personally because of what we've all observed, I'm I'm deep in the no mandates world. I think that personal sovereignty over your body is crucial and must be primary. And the rights of the state to impose a medical procedure on an individual I think that there should be a change in the Supreme Court position on this personally. What's the problem? It's all fine in the abstract where we imagine that we have an all knowing, benign state making informed, wisdom based decisions, but that's never the case. And so in a situation like that, I prefer to err on the side of if you decide to accept a medical procedure or not, that's your business and you have to live with the consequences.
Yeah.
And so you're taking a risk. And personally, I feel the same way about children, that their parents or guardians should be empowered to make those decisions and the state should have no role.
Well, it sounds like, Dr. Malone, that your hesitation or your opposition to vaccine mandates really ever under any circumstances are rooted, at least in part, in your skepticism of the government generally. And if we did have a government that we knew was always reporting the truth in a way that was consistent with our health and interests, in that situation, perhaps your position on vaccine mandates would be a bit more relaxed.
Or I would nuance it if, in theory, if you had an all-knowing, wise government that, like, for instance, in the case of the COVID situation, or what's happened with these RNA vaccines, and as I detail in the essay today, most of that was unknown, and the biology behind it and the immunology behind it was unknown. And yet people made unilateral decisions, and those decisions were often wrong. But it didn't stop them from imposing them on others. That's, if you, in the theoretical land in which we have a all-knowing, benign government or leadership, then this is Plato's Republic. If the thesis that one could have an all-knowing, benign, authoritarian leader might be the ideal for a state or for developing public health policy. But we never have that. It is
Yeah.
unachievable and it's never
Exactly.
been achieved.
Yes.
So to talk about that in the theoretical abstract is just, it's absurd. It
Yeah.
never exists, and we have to deal with humans as they are, which are fallible. It
Yes.
goes back to what we were saying earlier. We are not gods.
We're
Yeah.
not gods, Dr. Malone. It's interesting. It's precisely their recognition of man's capacity for evil that inspired the founding fathers to write the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. I think it was Adams who famously said that, it's man's capacity for good that allows the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and his capacity for evil that demands it.
Ha!
And
Good
I thought that
quote.
was very, very powerful. So
Yeah.
we do not live in a utopia, and it's our capacity for evil that requires us the default position that presumably the individual in consultation with his doctor knows what's best for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dr.
Fundamentalist
Malone,
constitutionalist position. And I think that if we had a stronger Supreme Court component of the originalist constitutionalist bent, then we might be able to get beyond that Jacobson ruling and many other things. But we don't
Agree
have.
with you.
yeah. And I know we have kept you over. I had one other question for you, and then we can let you run and take care of your horses. But one of the main reasons that the mandates were allowed to happen, or what enabled it, in my view, is the state capture. So big pharma having such inextricable ties to our institutions,
Not
as
just
well
big
as the big
pharma,
banks, as well as the big NGOs, and on and on and on.
big insurance, big finance. I mean, Larry Fink is basically the king of the world now.
At the World Economic Forum, plus,
They have more power than governments do. Functionally, what's happened is that capital is decoupled from geography. It used to be that capital was at least grounded in the nation state or region from whence it came. But now with globalization, capital is set free to roam the world to optimize return on investment and to allow the likes of the WEF, as we were talking about, or Larry Fink, to establish themselves as functional totalitarian dictators that determine global policy in ways that advantage them. You know, the disclosures just today, hot on X, is all the chatter around Epstein and Bill Gates collusion to profit from pandemics, is basically the meme that's going around. Bill Gates, you know, with this massive amount of money he's accrued through Microsoft, not because of his wisdom or insight or particular technical knowledge, but basically just the crude fact that he has so much cash, allows him to dominate global policy and public health.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of what we have, and that's a pale shadow compared to the BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, Bank of America, et cetera, nexus that dominates global capital. And also coming up, bubbling up right now through citizen journalism is the profound role of the insurance company that is now being vertically integrated down. So they're basically owning doctors, hospitals, pharmaceutical developers, et cetera. It's all being integrated under the banner of, quote, insurance, healthcare insurance, and all fueled by Obamacare. That's just that, you know, the folks that come from a libertarian or a narco-capitalist frame of reference, like Javier Milei, for one example, take the position. So this is basically the Austrian School of Economics takes the position that monopolies only exist because governments create them. And we're certainly seeing a lot of monopolistic behavior, but they've kind of gotten so big that they're decoupled from nation state. They are becoming global
Yeah. So
management.
whereas a monopoly formerly would affect, for good or for bad, usually for bad, only the nation or the state in which it was operating, because of the expansive capability of technology, it now affects people and nations much more broadly.
Yeah. It's in a way, we're now facing the workers' paradise of Karl Marx
Yeah.
on a big.
Grand scale. Well said.
Crazy.
Danielle, do you have any final thoughts for Dr. Malone? I feel like the time has absolutely flown by here, and I found myself just sitting there and listening to him for
It
good
has.
reason.
Well, one, Dr. Malone, thank you so much for your time. You're just such a gift to this nation and beyond. I just appreciate you so much. And we are mortally embarrassed by the behavior of Pennington, LSU's Pennington Biomedical Center. And I hope that they get their act together in short order and, don't make this state look so bad by not giving you the warm welcome you deserve.
Well, thanks. That's kind. I really do have a warm, open heart for the folks of Louisiana. Uh, I, the whole Cajun culture, you're grounded in the land, in the nature, in each other as a society and culture. Going back to the founding, why is it Louisiana? The
Yeah. And there are a lot of patriots here, Dr. Malone. There are a lot of patriots right here in Louisiana who know who you are and who have been buttressed on more than one dark day because of your courage as it relates to this
So
vaccine and this
I
industrial complex we're dealing with.
I really look forward to any attempt now and in the future to help Louisiana prosper and help West Virginia and many other states that have reached out to me to prosper and thrive. What a lovely opportunity when you're 66 years old to be able to help people and make a difference. I know that I'll go to my grave feeling a little bit better about myself, knowing that I did some things to help others, and in particular, the mama bears of Louisiana.
Thank you. And you've been a service to the truth. We're going to keep following you, and we hope we get a chance to see you at some point right down here in Louisiana.
Yes, sir. I look forward to it too.
Thank you, Dr. Malone, and we'd love to have you back as well.
Well, look forward. Just schedule it.
Awesome. All right. God bless you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Be good.
Chris, what an amazing opportunity to talk to someone who's been at the forefront of this fight. I mean, we in some small ways feel like we can understand what it is to have some arrows thrown our way, but nothing compares to what Dr. Malone and other brave doctors like him, not only vocal, but people who literally do have the expertise but don't wear the expert class badge, right? Standing up
Absolutely.
and fighting for the people. It's amazing.
It is amazing. He's What I admire about him is that he's resisted, I think, the natural human instinct, what Friedrich Nietzsche called the herd instinct of the majority. And I thought it was a brilliant way that Nietzsche put that. Everyone instinctively wants to be part of a herd, and they are instinctively averse to standing alone. And that's exactly why the virtue of courage exists. And I think if there's anyone who has exemplified that with regard to this COVID scam, which I think he probably would call it that, in making sure that the truth, the light of truth penetrated the darkness, it was Dr. Malone. I guess as disappointed as I am, Danielle, about his reception at Pennington, I can't really say that I'm surprised.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to bring up, Chris, before you turn to that was just his point about his wife keeping him so grounded. And I think the people, if you look at the landscape of people in your life who took the COVID vaccine and who didn't take the COVID vaccine, for me, one of the core factors or one of the commonalities I can see across the people who did not do it, it was people who were tethered in family, in community, more so than people who were living on their own in a city. And I just think it's an incredible distinction to be able to see that if you are surrounded by people who love you and who have your best interests in heart, what a different set of choices you are going to make than if you are surrounded by people who are prone to fear or who are caring about themselves first, right? Because a big part of the push for taking the vaccine is you have to protect other people. Don't worry about yourself. You got to protect other people. And I don't know, that was just that just kind of hit me when he talked about
I thought so too. I thought that was very profound. Everything that he said really during the show, that statement, he that it all goes back to the family. It all goes back to the core family that you have. And you're so right, Danielle. People who do not have a stable nucleus around them. And I'm not even necessarily saying it has to look like the traditional family. I'm simply saying people who do not have a nucleus of love and support around them are obviously going to be much more vulnerable to the type of psychological coercion, manipulation that we've seen and that Dr. Malone talked about here. Yeah, there's no question about that. But everything about him is rooted in his belief in family first and in his lifelong relationship with his wife. And he said, if I hadn't met her and married her, God only knows where my life would have gone, right?
Yeah. What a beautiful story. Well, Chris, just a couple of announcements here. Tomorrow is Wednesday. We'll be having Warrior Wednesday here for subscribers. You have the first and exclusive access to the chat. So light us up with questions tomorrow. It'll just be me and Chris here. We'll be talking about some of the crazy stuff that's happening here in our state. I think we'll probably give an update on carbon capture and what we expect to see at the legislature there. There's some stuff with elections going on and plenty more beyond that. So just join us tomorrow here at 10 Central, and we will give you the full scoop and our unfiltered
Yeah.
opinions. And then, and we'll definitely want to hear from the chat. So be here and be in a position to chat. And then on Thursday, we're super excited. Someone who's come on the show before will be rejoining us, Joe Oltman. He was featured in part of our discussion with Professor Dave Clements on Thursday. And Chris, you might not know this, but Joe is running for governor of Colorado now. So he is taking his battle from election integrity to Denver.
I heard about that last night. That's going to be interesting to see. That guy is an absolute warrior. You know that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody would have been able to withstand what that guy's been through.
I
And yet
know.
he keeps fighting, keep moving forward. And I'll tell you, he didn't make that announcement in order to walk through it, in half speed. I guarantee you he's going to pour everything he has into that race, and it'll be exciting to watch it. I don't know anything about it at this point. I just heard about that yesterday, but I know he's a good man, and I know he's been fighting for the truth.
Yeah, he absolutely has. And I am looking forward to his full vindication when we see Eric Coomer perp walked.
Well, you mean the Eric, don't worry, I already took care of that. Trump
Mm-hmm.
can't win, Coomer?
That's the one.
Oh, the same one. Okay.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Well, unless you have anything else here. Oh, you know what? And maybe just another reminder that folks, if you are not subscribed yet, you can join us. Just go to our website, freedomstate.us or join.freedomstate.us, and you can subscribe to get first right access to the chat.
Yeah.
So we are looking forward to that. And Chris, why don't you read the Red Zeppelin do a
Well, I don't really want to
sponsorship?
read it. I was
You
going,
don't
you're
need to
not going
read it.
oh,
Yeah.
you're gonna make me leave today without being able to tell you about my trip to Red Zeppelin yesterday. I went to Red Zeppelin yesterday with my second oldest son, Eli, and I got this large veggie pizza, which is the best in Baton Rouge, Danielle. Red Zeppelin is the best kept secret, but because of us, it's really not a secret anymore. Anybody who has not been to Red Zeppelin on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, you're truly missing out. The best environment, the best service, and the best pizza in the state of Louisiana. Go to Red Zeppelin today. Tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And I tried to play the Kai Fuego ad before the show. Obviously, that did not work out. I'm going to try and play it now, and we'll see if it doesn't play. Then you can tell us something. Yeah, I think it's just a graphic we have.
Well, that's
here.
okay because Cayo Fuego in Pineville, Louisiana. Danielle, I went in there the other day. Jose and Andres. Jose worked, as a busboy for years in the restaurant business in that area. Ultimately got to a point where he opened his own Mexican restaurant. It is fantastic. I was in Pineville the other day. They served me this homemade margarita, and I was like, who's going to drink the other gallon of this? I'm here by myself. But it was outstanding. All of the food is wonderful. The service is great. If you're in Pineville or in Rapides Parish or passing through, if you live there, Cayo Fuego is outstanding. Please go there and tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Yes.
Andre and Jose.
And a huge thank you to our sponsors. We just appreciate you so much for putting your faith in us, for standing with us. And if you are someone who has a business that is interested in supporting the show and interested in us promoting your business, please reach out to us either at chris@lacag.org or you can reach out to me, Danielle, at freedomstate.us, and we would love to talk to you about some of the options we have for our sponsors. Well, Chris, it has been a blessing to talk to you today, to be here with you today. We didn't talk too much to each other, but we both talked to Dr. Malone.
It's such a privilege to be able to have guests on who speak the truth and who have not been beaten down psychologically and defeated at the altar of institutionally sanctioned propaganda. I enjoy being friends with people like that. I enjoy having people like that on the State of Freedom, and it is such a privilege, Danielle, to be with you. The number one conservative podcast in Louisiana and in the top 10% globally. We are that for a reason, because we are not going to be slaves to lies. We are going to tell the truth, and our listeners know that, and we are going to be an organ and a vessel of freedom throughout the state and beyond. And that's why it is such a privilege to be with you today.
Well, God bless you, Chris. I will see you tomorrow morning.
God bless you.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org.
We'll see you next time. God bless.